All great change begins with chaos. Deepak Chopra. People often love stability because it provides a sense of security. Yet, prolonged stability is exactly what lulls the soul into a deep slumber. Human beings only truly change when they are pushed to the absolute limits of pain, loss, or crisis. Just as a forest can only achieve a powerful rebirth after a great wildfire, the human inner self often matures after its most chaotic days. No one undergoes a transformation through ease. The most profound shifts always begin with a phase where everything seems to collapse. Broken beliefs, overturned plans, and emotions as tangled as a storm, with no way out. Chaos is the moment when people must confront the truths they once tried to evade. When life remains peaceful, it is easy to live by momentum and accept a mediocre version of oneself. But adversity, like an invisible hand, pulls humans out of their comfort zones. It forces them to think differently, live differently, and become stronger. There are those who completely change their worldview after just a single upheaval. A failure awakens them. A betrayal teaches them their own worth. A period of solitude teaches them how to heal themselves. Chaos does not come to destroy us. Sometimes it appears to dismantle an old version of ourselves that is no longer relevant. The most terrifying thing is not the days when life shakes us, but a life so flat that we lose the desire for change. A lake that remains still for too long becomes stagnant. The human soul is the same. Only when stirred are our latent energies finally awakened. The strongest people are usually not those who have never faced a storm, but those who have walked through the ruins of their lives and learned to rebuild themselves from the fragments. They understand that chaos is not the end. It is the painful stage of transformation before a new version of themselves is born. Life operates like a season of falling leaves. Before a tree can bud, it must endure days of withered dryness. Before the dawn appears, the sky is always at its darkest. And before a person reaches deep maturity, they often must navigate a road filled with disorientation and confusion. But it is in those very moments that character is forged, awareness expands, and inner strength begins to grow. Because sometimes, what is breaking you isn't meant to end you. It is meant to create an entirely new person, stronger, deeper, and more deserving of the future ahead. There are no ordinary moments. There is always something going on. Peaceful warrior, we are accustomed to calling many days ordinary simply because no major event occurs. Waking up on time, a simple meal, a brief conversation, a quiet, rainy afternoon, it all seems so familiar that the mind considers it meaningless. But the truth is, life never stands still. Even in the silent moments, time is subtly shifting, emotions are changing, and people are either growing or slowly losing a part of themselves. Nothing is truly ordinary. There are only things so close to us that we forget their value. People often only realize the meaning of a moment once it has passed. We rarely know that a hug today might be the last. A seemingly random chat could change the future, or a peaceful day will be exactly what we remember with regret years later. Life is not just made of grand events. It is woven from thousands of tiny moments the soul has passed through. A look, a laugh, a moment of vulnerability, or a seemingly small decision can sometimes be the turning point that shapes an entire life. But humans are often too busy chasing distant things to realize that the present is where all change is happening every second. We are always waiting for something special to feel like we are alive. We think happiness must be great achievements, brilliant moments, or spectacular transformations. Therefore, we unconsciously overlook the present. But then one day, looking back, what moves us most to tears are the very things once deemed mundane. It was the sound of a mother calling for dinner, a familiar patch of sky on the way to school, or days spent sitting beside a loved one without knowing time was quietly counting down. The most ordinary things are often the most sacred, for they form the true fabric of a person's life. Life is like the current beneath a calm lake. Even if the surface appears tranquil, invisible movements always exist underneath. A soul is healing. A heart is slowly cooling. A dream is growing in silence. A person is silently changing without even realizing it themselves. No moment is meaningless if we are mindful enough to feel it. And perhaps true maturity is when one learns to be fully present in every small minute of life, because it is in those ordinary things that life is silently blooming. Your life does not get better by chance. It gets better by change. Jim Rohn. Many people spend their entire youth hoping that one day luck will knock on their door. A sudden opportunity, a person appearing at the right time, or a crisis big enough to pull them out of a dead-end reality. But life does not operate on pity. Luck may appear once or twice, like a passing breeze, but it is not enough to change a person's destiny if their inner self still holds old mindsets, old habits, and old fears. What truly creates a turning point is not the circumstances, but the moment a person decides to change themselves. People often prefer to blame fate rather than face their own stagnation, because change is a painful process. It forces us to let go of familiar things, even when those very things are quietly destroying our lives. A person who wants a better life but keeps a negative mindset is like trying to open the door to the future with a broken key. Life only changes when a person changes how they look, how they think, and how they act. A small decision today can silently shape the entire future. The person who starts waking up earlier becomes more disciplined and learns more. They are bit by bit pulling themselves out of the old version that once caused them suffering. Many think change must be something grand, but in truth, the most powerful revolutions often begin with the smallest details. A seed does not become a giant tree overnight. It grows through silent transformation beneath the dark soil. Humans are the same. A day, a little more diligent, a little more patient, a little more positive. Those seemingly invisible changes will eventually accumulate into a completely different life. The most terrifying thing is not failure, but living forever in an old loop where one expects new results but dares not change anything about themselves. Luck may bring a person to the door of opportunity, but only change gives them the ability to walk through that door. For ultimately, life does not reward those who only know how to wait. It reserves its better parts for those who dare to shed their weak versions. And sometimes, the most important moment of a person's life is not when luck appears, but when they are brave enough to say to themselves, "I must change." The tragedy of life doesn't lie in not reaching your goal. The tragedy lies in having no goal to reach. Benjamin Mays. People often fear failure like they fear an abyss. But in reality, failure has never been the most terrifying darkness. What is scarier is a life passed in a state of aimlessness, waking up every morning not knowing what one is living for, walking without direction, like a boat drifting in the ocean without a compass or a destination. A person with a goal, even if they are far from success, still carries within them a silent light. They have a reason to persevere and a motivation to stand up after every fall. But those without a goal are different. They don't truly live. they merely exist. Their soul is like a room locked for years, without sunlight or wind, where every emotion gradually gathers dust and rots in silence. People often mistakenly believe that happiness lies at the destination. But what makes life feel meaningful is the process of pursuit. A mountain climber is not only happy standing on the peak. It is every trembling step on the cliffside and every drop of sweat in the cold wind that makes them truly feel the pulse of life. A goal creates mental energy. It pulls a person out of stagnation, fights the feeling of uselessness, and fills the inner void with hope. People with goals usually endure pain better because they understand that pain is serving a greater purpose. Meanwhile, those without goals are easily swept into short-lived pleasures, living day by day through distraction and forgetfulness, only to look back one day with a sense of emptiness so suffocating it catches their breath. Life does not require everyone to become a legend. Not everyone needs to stand on a brilliant stage or possess glorious victories, but every human being needs a fire of their own, something that makes their eyes sparkle when they speak of the future. A goal doesn't just lead the way, it saves a person from spiritual decay, because sometimes what keeps a person moving forward isn't the certainty of success, but knowing their heart still has something to strive for. And that is the most beautiful sign of a soul that is still alive. Don't go around saying the world owes you a living. The world owes you nothing. It was here first. Mark Twain. Humans often enter life with an invisible expectation that if they are good enough, work hard enough, or suffer enough, life must treat them more fairly. But life does not operate on personal feelings. The sun still rises, even when someone is in despair. The crowd keeps moving, even when a heart is breaking. This world existed before we appeared, and it does not change its laws just to cater to anyone's desires. This cold truth is the first step toward maturity. The feeling that the world owes me often stems from prolonged disappointment. When life doesn't go as planned, people start to see themselves as victims. They compare, they complain, and they wonder why others have more than they do. But the more they nurture this mindset, the more powerless they become. For when we believe our happiness depends on life treating us better, we inadvertently hand over all control to circumstances. That is the most dangerous state of the soul, when a person stops taking responsibility for their own life and only waits for fairness from the outside. The truth is, life never promised anything to anyone. No one is guaranteed success, love, or protection from loss. But because of that, every good thing we obtain becomes even more precious. One who appreciates opportunities will be stronger than one who only complains about the lack of them. One who accepts reality will mature faster than one who remains drowned in the feeling of being treated unfairly. Life owes no one success, but it always offers the power of choice. Either continue to resent or stand up and build one's own value. True maturity comes when one understands that the world does not exist to serve their emotions. Just as the ocean does not calm down simply because a small boat fears the waves, life will not soften in the face of complaints. But that does not make life cruel. On the contrary, it makes every victory more meaningful. Because when a person overcomes difficulties on their own, creates their own opportunities, and takes responsibility for their own fate, they discover an inner strength that no one can give or take away. What makes a person respectable is not how much they have received from the world, but what they have done with what they have. Instead of asking what life owes you, perhaps the better question is, What will I do with the short time I have to exist in this world? And it is the moment a person stops demanding life to favor them that they truly begin to live with the character of a mature human being. A goal is a dream with a deadline. Napoleon Hill. A dream, if it only stays in your head, will be like beautiful clouds drifting across the sky, moving us for a moment, but vanishing when the wind changes direction. A goal is when a person dares to give that dream a destination, a time limit, and a commitment to themselves. That is when desire ceases to be a vague emotion and becomes a declaration of war against procrastination, laziness, and the fears within the mind. We like to dream big, but we fear paying the price for what we desire, because when a dream is given a deadline, it immediately turns into pressure. It forces a person to act, to wake up earlier, and to keep going even when exhausted. Someone saying, "I want to be successful," is still dreaming, but someone saying, "In the next 3 years, I will become a better version of myself," that person has begun the journey of changing their fate. A deadline is the bridge between imagination and reality. Without it, dreams can easily become a sanctuary for those who only wait for miracles. This life is full of people who once held burning aspirations in their hearts, but as years passed, they lost themselves in silent procrastination. They live like candles that were never lit, retaining their shape, but never truly shining. The most painful thing is not going slowly, but standing still, so long that you forget where you once wanted to go. A goal gives a person discipline. It is like an invisible clock, constantly reminding us that time waits for no one. And strangely enough, it is that very pressure that makes a person grow. Strong souls are not created in ease. They are forged in the journey of pursuing something larger than themselves. When a dream has a deadline, the human heart begins to awaken. They no longer live day by day on fragile hopes, but live through every real step forward. For in the end, what makes a life meaningful is not how much one has dreamed, but how many dreams one has dared to turn into reality. There are no secrets to success. It is the result of preparation, hard work, and learning from failure. Colin Powell. People always want to believe there exists a shortcut to glory, a secret formula that changes life overnight. But life has never operated by magic. Behind every sustainable success are the quiet days that no one sees, the nights of working to exhaustion, the moments of self-doubt, and the silent failures that could crush a weak soul. Success is not born of luck. It is molded from discipline, from persistence, and from the ability to stand up after every time life knocks you down. People often fear failure, not because of the pain, but because failure wounds the ego. It makes us feel small, powerless, and not as good as we once thought. But it is precisely at that moment that a person truly matures. Failure is like a cold mirror, reflecting every weakness we have tried to hide. It strips away complacency, forces us to look at ourselves, and teaches us how to change. Successful people are not those who have never failed. They are those who know how to turn every wound into experience and turn every stumble into a step to climb higher. There are those who give up on life after a single failure, but there are also those who, the more they are tested, the more their inner self becomes like steel tempered in a red fire. Preparation is the silent foundation of every victory. A tree that wants to reach high must plant its roots deep in the earth. Humans are no different. What others call talent is sometimes just the result of thousands of hours of practice in solitude. No one sees the sweat behind the spotlight. The world only sees the moment an athlete stands on the podium, but not the days their body was so sore they couldn't walk. They only see a successful entrepreneur, but not the sleepless nights of pressure and fear. Success always has its price, and that price is usually the persistence that the majority are not patient enough to pay. The most beautiful part of success lies not in money or fame, but in the person we become throughout that journey. It is hard work that matures the mind. It is failure that makes the heart deeper. And it is the times that seemed impossible to overcome that help us discover the latent power within ourselves. Life does not reward those who only daydream. It gives opportunities to those who dare to act, dare to suffer, and dare to keep walking, even when their legs are weary, because ultimately, success is not a secret to be discovered. It is the inevitable result of people who never allowed themselves to give up. Every consequence has a root cause. Find and resolve the root cause rather than trying to fix the consequence, because the consequence will never end. Every cause. Celestine. Chua, a broken relationship, a failed job, an exhausted soul, or a life that keeps repeating the same suffering. But very few people are calm enough to sit down and ask, what truly created all of this? We often busily wipe the floor, but forget to turn off the running tap. And that is why many people live their whole lives in a loop of hurt. They treat the symptoms, but ignore the cause. Humans prefer dealing with consequences over facing roots, because the real cause often lies in the most painful place. A person who is always angry might not just have a bad personality, but might have internal years of being hurt and lacking love. A person who repeatedly fails isn't necessarily unlucky. They might carry an invisible fear that causes them to constantly sabotage their own life. A society full of pressure doesn't just produce tired people. It creates lost souls living by reaction rather than awareness. Consequences are always easy to see, while root causes are often hidden deep under layers of habit, false beliefs, and unhealed wounds. The sad thing is that most people prefer quick solutions. They want to erase the pain immediately and feel comfortable instantly, like taking a painkiller without treating the underlying disease. But life does not work that way. If the roots are rotten, repainting the leaves green will not save the tree from collapsing. If the mind is still full of negativity, insecurity, and laziness to change, then no matter how much the circumstances improve, a person will still drag themselves back into the old pit. For every prolonged problem is a sign that the true cause still exists. Maturity is not just learning how to handle events, but learning how to trace the source of those events. They understand that healing is not about hiding wounds, but about daring to touch the most painful place to clean it from the inside. It is a difficult process because sometimes the root cause is exactly what we do not want to admit about ourselves. But only when we dare to face the roots can we truly escape the cycle of suffering and rebuild our lives sustainably. Because ultimately, every consequence is just an echo. What decides a person's future always lies in the cause they choose to face or continue to avoid. Every moment you have is a gift. Spend it on things that matter. Don't waste your time thinking about unhappy things. Celestine Chua. Humans often live as if they have infinite time. We postpone loving, postpone happiness, and postpone even being true to ourselves, only to unconsciously bury those precious months and days in regret, anger, and painful memories that cannot be changed. The irony is that life does not take a person away in one grand moment, but silently steals them through every day, wasted on negative thoughts. Every second that passes is like sand slipping through fingers. The more you try to hold it, the more it vanishes. And in the end, what causes the most pain is usually not what we failed at, but that we spent too much time being sad over things that weren't worth it. The human mind has a tendency to cling tighter to pain than to joy. A wounding word can stay for years, while hundreds of happy moments are forgotten very quickly. It is the brain's survival instinct. It is always alert to the negative to protect us. But without sufficient awareness, we become prisoners of our own thoughts. There are those who live in the present, but whose souls are forever stuck in a past event. They repeat the pain like touching an unhealed wound, thereby losing the ability to feel the beauty of life right before their eyes. Meanwhile, life quietly flows on. Dawn appears every morning, and the people who love them are still waiting for them to smile. But they are too busy sinking in the darkness of memory. Life is inherently shorter than we imagine. One day, we will realize the things that once kept us awake were actually, sadly, small. The arguments, the thoughtless words, the fleeting disappointments, all will eventually vanish like smoke. Only time does not return. Because of that, maturity is not living without sadness, but learning how to choose what is worthy of keeping in the mind. A garden cannot bloom if every day one only focuses on watering the weeds. The human soul is the same. If we keep nurturing negativity, anxiety, and regret, then peace will never have a chance to grow. Every moment of being alive is a privilege that life bestows. And perhaps the most beautiful way to respond to that gift is to live more deeply, love more, and let go of the things that are old. Spend time with those who make your heart warm, on dreams still unfinished, on peaceful afternoons, and on yourself. For ultimately, life is not measured by the number of years we exist, but by how we have used each of those precious moments to truly live. What lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. Ralph Waldo Emerson. We often spend our whole lives obsessed with the past or fearing the future. Some are forever pulled back by old hurts and failures that once made them lose faith in themselves. Others live in insecurity about tomorrow, fearing things that haven't happened yet, to the point of forgetting how to live for today. But few realize that what defines a person has never been external circumstances. It is the strength that exists within them. The past may leave wounds. The future may contain storms. But the inner self is the place that decides whether a person will fall or stand up. Strong people are not strong because they have never suffered, but because they possess an inner power great enough to overcome suffering. There are those who experience a very small event, yet shatter completely, while others walk through the darkest days and still keep the light in their soul. The difference lies in the world inside them. The inner self is like the roots of a tree. If the roots are deep enough, a storm cannot knock it down. Similarly, when a person has faith, will, and a clear understanding of their own worth, they will not easily be collapsed by life. The most terrifying thing is not external difficulty, but the moment a person loses their internal spiritual strength. We often evaluate ourselves by what has happened or what we have not yet achieved. A failure makes many think they are useless. A rejection makes them doubt their own value. But the truth is that humans always carry within them much greater possibilities than what they see. Just as coal must endure immense pressure to turn into diamond, a person's true strength often only appears in adversity. There are potentials that sleep for many years until life forces them to be strong. And it is in the times that seem most exhausting that we discover an incredible source of energy existing within us. The most beautiful part of being human is not a glorious past or a perfect future, but the ability to be reborn from within. A sufficiently strong soul can turn loss into a lesson, grief into depth, and dark days into the motivation to mature. Life will always change, and circumstances will always be uncertain. But inner power is what can lead a person through every upheaval. And perhaps the most important journey of a lifetime is not conquering the outer world, but discovering the strength that lies dormant in one's own soul.